Just my luck. Los Angeles was the last place Walter Dimchuk would have chosen for the convention. A confirmed Torontonian, Walter had never been able to take California seriously. It seemed to him that the people there merely played at life under the palm trees and came up with Looney Tune ideas. Take the cuisine, if you could call it that. It was either Mexican, which gave Walter the runs, or so-called Californian, watercress, alfalfa sprouts, and avocado with everything, even a burger. Faggot food, more like. He'd had a house salad just yesterday in which he hadn't recognized one single ingredient. Cilantro, arugula, fresh basil, sun-dried tomatoes, and goat's cheese, the waiter had told him, with a dressing of tarragon, balsamic vinegar, cardamom oil, and toasted pine nuts, for Christ's sake. Just his luck. Couldn't a person get a simple grilled cheese sandwich and a glass of milk in this state? Smog, killer freeways, serial killer bubblegum cards, earthquakes, Rodney King riots, more Fruit Loops per square mile than an asylum. The list went on. He hadn't been happy about leaving Kate and Maria alone in the house either. They might not be as close a family as they had once been. What could you expect after 35 years of marriage and 3 children grown up to adults? But they still got on all right, mostly thanks to Maria, a late blessing when Kate was 45 and now a gawky 13-year-old. The only good thing about the trip that Walter had been able to come up with on the plane over, Air Canada 3 hours late, sweet Jesus, just Walter's fucking luck, was a brief respite from a cool Toronto October. But he hadn't banked on the Santa Ana. When Toronto got hot, you sweated. Here, you dried to dust, dehydrated in seconds. He had once read a story about the hot desert wind, the way it made meek wives feel the edge of the carving knife and study their husbands' necks. The writer was right. It did make you edgy and crazy. Walter felt as if he'd had a steel band around his forehead for 2 days. It was getting tighter. "Wally!" Walter came out of his reverie. He was sitting in the hotel lobby taking a smoke break between sessions. Nobody seemed to smoke these days. In California, it was hardly surprising. You couldn't find many places where it was legal to do so. Damned government health warnings on everything now, even the wine. And he had seen the way the young hotshots with their white teeth turned up their noses when he lit up, even if they were sitting in a goddamn bar. Christ, who was this coming towards him, hand outstretched, teeth bared in a predatory smile? Awkwardly, he got to his feet. "Hi, good to see you," he said. "Good to see you," the stranger said. "It's been years." "Yeah." Walter scratched the side of his right eye and frowned. "Now, where the hell was it?" Baltimore, 79, Jimmy LaValle. Remember? We closed down that bar together." "Yeah, of course. How you doing, Jimmy?" And so it went on. The empty greetings, inane conversations, tales of triple bypasses, and all the time Walter knew, deep inside, that they were all out to get him. Were all laughing at him. "Oh, old Wally Woodchuck, Wally Dump Truck, Wally Upchuck, fucking dinosaur cells have been down for years." No one had said it to his face, but they didn't need to. Wally knew. At 59, he was too old for the pool supplies business, and it was obvious from the number of tanned young men around the convention that the company thought so too. You'd almost think the new breed were chosen because they'd look good sitting around a swimming pool, like the way auto manufacturers used curvaceous women to sell cars. Wally's curves were all in the wrong places. Ungrateful bastards. He'd given his life to Hudson's Pools and Supplies, and this was how they paid him back. He felt like that salesman in the play must have done. The one that guy who'd been married to Marilyn Monroe, not the baseball player, one of the others, had written for Dustin Hoffman. He had heard the talk around the office, noticed the muted conversations and insincere greetings as he passed couples chatting in the corridor. They were putting him out to pasture. That was why they sent him to California. He wouldn't be surprised if his office, if you could call a screened-off corner in an open plan an office, was cleaned out when he got back and someone else was sitting there in his place. Some tanned young asshole with white teeth and a wolfish smile, maybe called Scott. He got rid of Jimmy with promises to look him up if he was ever in Baltimore, not if he could help it, and looked at his watch. 5 o'clock. Shit. Time for another boring session, then up to get change for the convention banquet. Tofu burgers again, most likely. Maybe grab a few minutes in between and call Kate. Thank God that was over with, Walter thought, as he waved goodnight to the stragglers in the Pasadena ballroom and headed for the elevator. What a fucking ordeal. And typical California, too. No smoking, not anywhere in the dining hall. Not tofu burgers, but almost as bad. Cornish game hen or some such skinny little bird stuffed with grapes and olives and jalapeno peppers, basted in lemon, garlic, and the ubiquitous cilantro, of course. And they had to put him at the table with that loudmouth jerk, Carson, from United. Just his luck. Still, Walter had kept his end up. He had been nice to the right people, managed to smile, passed his company card around, even if the recipients did absently slip it into their side pockets where they'd throw it out with the lint in the hotel matches. A funny business, these conventions, he thought as he went into his room. Hours of manic glad-handing, hurried conversations in lobbies and men's rooms, talking business even with your dick in your hand. Then when you finally got to be alone at the end of the night, all you felt was an incredible loneliness descend. At least Walter did. So, there you are in your strange hotel room alone, miles from home, after the party. Oh, the guys were setting up all-night poker sessions, planning trips to strip joints and bars, but Walter had had enough of all that, and of his colleagues. He wanted to be alone. But he didn't want to feel alone. It was the wind, he thought. That goddamn Santa Ana. And the air conditioner had quit. Just his luck. He lay down on the bed with his hands behind his head and tried to relax. He couldn't. He hadn't drunk much. That was one thing he had under control these days. That was why he couldn't for the life of him remember closing any bar with Jimmy LaValle in Baltimore. If those tanned bastards knew what they looked like after they'd had a few too many. Anyway, those days were past. As he lay there restless in the heat, feeling the band tighten around his head, the heartburn start to kick in, the resentment and fear churn inside him, he became aware of one feeling he would never have expected. God damn it! Walter Dimchuck was horny. Not that it had never happened before, of course, but never with such a keen, urgent edge. Not for a long time. He remembered the outing he'd had with Al and Larry yesterday afternoon. Given a couple of spare hours, they had driven to Santa Monica, walked on the pier, the boardwalk, toward Venice. And now, as he lay, trying to find sleep, all Walter could find were the disturbing images of those girls in their bikinis. All that smooth, firm, tanned flesh. He turned over. This was ridiculous. His lust felt so strong it was gripping his heart, making him squirm. The images churned in his mind, spurring him on. It was the damn heat. He knew it. Maybe if he could get out for a while, tell someone at the desk to fix his air conditioning while he took a little drive around town. He sat up and slid his shoes back on. Yeah, that was the thing to do. Maybe drive to the ocean and cool off a little. That or a cold shower. He looked at his watch. Still only 11 o'clock. Okay. Car keys? Jacket? Such romantic-sounding street names they had. La Cienega, Sepulveda, La Brea. But they weren't so fucking romantic when you were on them. They were either freeways or roads running past shitty little Spanish-style stucco houses with graffiti all over the stucco and postage-stamped gardens full of junk. It was cool in the rental, but Walter still couldn't shake the horniness. He'd pass a row of stores set back from the road and see a gang of kids there. Girls in cut-off jeans and halter tops drinking Coke from the bottle, breasts jutting out. It was getting worse, as if the Santa Ana somehow slipped in through the air conditioning and messed with his brain. He found himself on a Hollywood boulevard. Walter loved old movies, the black and white kind, and the real stars they had back then, like Cary Grant, Garbo, Bogey, Gable, Jimmy Stewart. Christ, he must have seen It's a Wonderful Life about 20 times, and then they went and colorized the motherfucker. But the boulevard, with all those stars in the sidewalk, had gone to porn theaters, dirty bookstores with barred windows, hookers, pimps, muggers, losers. He was stopped at a red light when he heard the tap on his window. If it had been a man, he would have burnt rubber driving away, even through a stoplight. It wasn't. Nervously, he rolled down the window. "Want good time, mister? Want have some fun?" He looked at her. She must have been all of 16, going on 40, but she was pretty. A Latino with that honey skin and lustrous black hair. From what he could see of the rest of her, it looked pretty good, too. Walter hesitated. He had never been with a hooker before. He knew it happened at conventions, and somehow the guys thought it was all right playing away from home like that. What the old lady doesn't know won't hurt her, eh, Wally? But Walter had never done it. Now, though, with this girl hanging in his window, practically spilling her tits onto his lap, with the lights changing, someone blowing a horn behind him, and the desire sharp as a knife cutting away inside him, well, he opened the door. The hooker got in, and Walter drove off. She was wearing a short black skirt, way up around her thighs, and a tight pink halter made of material so thin he could see her nipples poking through. Her bare midriff was flat, with an outy belly button. His mouth was dry. "Where?" he croaked. She directed him to a run-down hotel off Sunset, and he followed her up the stairs in a daze, aware only of the smell of disinfectant and rotting meat in the dim lobby, and of the scuffed, stained linoleum on the stairs. In the shaded light, the room didn't look too bad. What did it matter anyway? She took his money first, then Walter watched as she wriggled out of the halter, and her honey breasts with the dark, hard nipples quivered as they fell free. Grinning at him, the tip of her tongue between her small white teeth, she unzipped her skirt and let it fall. She was wearing only white panties now. He could see the dark shadow of her pubic hair, and some of the hairs curled around the edges of the silky material. "You no undress?" she asked. "Want me take your clothes off?" Walter nodded. Deftly, she took off his jacket, shirt, pants. "Oh my, you so big," she said, touching his erection. "So big and hard." "Safe," she said, reaching for a condom from her bag. "Always safe." Walter felt glad of that. AIDS had crossed his mind more than once between Hollywood Boulevard and the hotel, but if she always insisted on a condom, she was bound to be clean, he thought. Desire seared like the sharp, hot desert wind inside him, driving him recklessly and thoughtlessly on. She put her hands on his chest and pushed him gently down on the bed. Then she straddled him, felt for his penis between her legs, and thrust down on it slowly. Walter groaned and reached for her breasts as she moved back and forth on him. Dimly, he was aware of the bed springs creaking, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered but this moist, warm tightness all around him, sucking him in, hooking onto his desire and channeling it, concentrating it. He couldn't have held back if he'd tried. It seemed like no time at all when everything burst and warmth flooded his veins. The woman moaned. He knew she was faking, but he didn't care. Then it was all over. Walter thanked her and hurried out to his car and his shame. At first he sat there breathing hard and cranked up the air conditioner. His stomach clenched, his loins felt dry and empty, but the steel band was still there, tightening around his skull. Lighting a cigarette, he turned onto the boulevard and headed back to the hotel. They still hadn't fixed the air conditioning, he noticed, and when he phoned down to complain, the desk clerk said no one would be able to do it till the morning. Just his fucking luck. He should have felt better after sating his desire, he knew, but when he lay down and relived what he had just done, he was appalled. It was only midnight. No more than an hour ago he had been an innocent, a virtuous man. Now he had been tainted. How little time it took. And now he was worried, too. Condom or no condom, he could still get AIDS. That was a fact. The wind had done this to him. The wind and the palm trees and the hooker with the wonderful breasts and the sweet, warm place inside her. He'd been suckered. Jesus Christ, he wept. How could he face Kate and Maria again after he'd been corrupted? That hooker hadn't been much older than his daughter. The goddamn hot wind had made him fuck his own daughter. Even if they didn't know, he knew. He couldn't face them. His marriage was over, his family broken, all because of some two-bit whore who had tempted him and given him a disease. He ground his teeth. The heat seemed to bore into his bones the way the damp cold did in England that time he went with Kate so many years ago. He was burning up. Maybe he was already showing symptoms of whatever disease that whore had given him. But that was ridiculous. Maybe he'd got flu. Or maybe it was the Santa Ana. He turned over and tried to sleep, but the steel band tightened, and the guilt hammered away at him, making sleep impossible. His life was ruined, all because of fucking California. He couldn't think straight anymore. Nothing but images shot through his mind, disjointed images. Kate crying, Maria slipping her panties off and rubbing her hand between her legs, the tanned assholes with the $2,000 smiles who were going to have his job. He couldn't take it anymore. He had to do something. Christ, they'd walked over old Walter Dimchuk for long enough, pushed him around, used him for a doormat, laughed behind his back. Now they'd corrupted his soul. God damn it, enough was enough. His luck was going to change. Hardly thinking, he got dressed quickly and picked up his car keys. At the last moment, just before the door shut behind him, he went back and picked up the ice pick from the dish by the television. This time, it was a Caucasian girl. Blonde hair, clean-cut looks, but the same style, tight short skirt and halter top. And she wanted to make a quick phone call before she got into his car and directed him to a different hotel. It was a step up from the last one, he noticed, for Wally was noticing things clearly now, like the old-fashioned bell on the wooden desk, the discreet damask armchairs in the lobby, the wood paneling look, the hovering scent of sandalwood. In fact, Walter felt strangely calm and in control now he knew what he was going to do. The steel band had loosened. He smiled to himself as she went through her undressing routine, a bit more elaborate and drawn out than the last one, with slow gestures and teasing glances. He felt no desire now. It was all gone. He let her continue. Outside, the hot wind huffed and puffed at the windows. The halter revealed white, droopy breasts, the kind that fold over like envelope flaps. Her eyes were unfocused and dull, as if she were on drugs. She had a large bruise on the outside of her right thigh and a little scar just under her navel. Appendicitis, he wondered. But the appendix was further to the right, wasn't it? No matter. She stood naked before him, finally, and he still felt no desire, only disgust and hatred. It wasn't the same one who had ruined him, corrupted him, but they were all the same underneath. Whores. They all shared the same tainted, rotten soul. She would do. He let her unbutton his shirt. Then he moved her gently away and asked her to lie face down on the bed. "Want to come in from behind, hey, honey?" she said, and grinned lasciviously, lying down and hugging the pillow. "No, that's not it." Walter's voice felt strange, dry and stuck deep in his chest. "That's not it at all." "It's okay by me." Walter slipped the ice pick from his jacket pocket and felt its point cool in his dry hand. He was just about to raise it above his head and plunge it into the back of her neck when he heard a sound behind him. Everything happened so fast. First, the door opened, and Walter saw a huge man blocking the exit, a giant with blonde hair hanging over his massive shoulders, a tanned face carved of rock, and veins thick as cables snaking down his thick arms. The man, he also noticed, was wearing a sleeveless white T-shirt and baggy flowered pants held up by elastic. "Shit," Walter thought, glancing back at the girl for a second, then at his jacket over the back of a chair. "They're going to rip me off, rob me. That's what the phone call was about. Just my fucking luck." But what Walter didn't really register, until it was much too late, was that when he turned towards the doorway, he had an ice pick still raised above his head, and the other man had a gun. Walter never did get a chance to explain. The giant raised his gun and, without a word, fired 2 shots right into Walter Dimchuk's angry, corrupt, and unlucky heart.